Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually, we are here to make you the smartest person in the room about, tech trends or history or some obscure scientific breakthrough. But
hmm
today feels a little different. We're looking at something that is, I think, going to fundamentally change the way you look at your own relationships, your friends' relationships, and honestly, how you read the news every morning.
It is a heavy topic today, I won't lie.
Yeah.
But I would argue this is probably the most necessary conversation we've had in a long time.
I agree. And before we get into the heavy data, and we have a lot of it, I want to start by challenging everyone listening right now with a mental exercise. Be honest with yourself. When I say the words domestic violence, what's the very first image that pops into your head?
If I had to guess,
Hmm.
based on pretty much every movie and TV show we've ever seen, most people are picturing physical signs. They see bruises, they see a black eye,
Broken bones, yeah.
or police taking photos of injuries in an emergency room, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the Hollywood version. That's what we're taught to look for, the battered wife stereotype. But here's the twist, and this is what we're going to unpack today. The most dangerous form of abuse often leaves no physical marks at all.
That's right. And if we only look for the bruises, we miss the cage being built around the victim until it's too late.
So, our mission today is to explore the concept of coercive control. We need to understand what it actually is, why it's statistically lethal, and why society and the legal system has historically just completely missed the boat on this. Because for a long time, if there wasn't a hit, there wasn't a crime.
Which is a terrifying gap in our understanding.
It is. And to kick this off, let's look at the data. You pulled a statistic from the New South Wales Domestic Violence Death Review team that actually, it stopped me in my tracks. I had to read it twice.
It's staggering. So just to give a bit of context, this team reviewed intimate partner homicides between 2008 and 2016. They did a deep dive into 112 specific murder cases to see what the history of the relationship looked like.
Okay, so 112 tragic endings.
Right. Now, out of those 112 murders,
Yeah.
guess how many involved this pattern of coercive control?
I know the answer because I have the notes, but it still feels impossible. It was 111, right?
111 out of 112. That's 99%.
Wow. That's nearly every single one.
Every single one.
It's not just a correlation at that point. It's basically the prerequisite.
Precisely. And here's the context that makes that number even more chilling. Many of those cases had no prior history of physical violence. The police had never been called for an assault. There were no hospital records. From the outside, looking in through the kitchen window, the relationship looked completely normal until the tragedy occurred.
That's terrifying because it means we're all trained to look for the wrong red flags. We're waiting for a punch or a scream.
Mm.
But the murder is actually the end result of a silence.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the definition. What exactly is coercive control? Because it sounds technical, almost academic, but the reality is just so much more sinister.
It is. The sources define it as a pattern of behavior used to dominate, strip away freedom, and create fear. It's not about a single argument or a partner having a bad temper or being grumpy. This is a strategic course of conduct. It's a campaign.
I was really struck by the analogy used in the testimony from the New South Wales Parliament report. One survivor described it as death by 1,000 cuts.
That's a perfect visual.
It's not one big blow. It's this cumulative erosion of the self. You don't even realize you're bleeding out until you're empty.
Yeah.
So let's get specific. Because domination is a big, abstract word. How does someone actually do this to another person? What does it look like on, a Tuesday night?
Well, let's look at the tactics. It almost always starts with isolation, but it's rarely as blunt as you can't see your mom anymore.
Right.
If someone said that on a first date, you'd leave.
Right, it has to be subtler. It's the death by 1,000 cuts version of isolation.
Exactly. It's comments like, I don't trust that friend of yours. She doesn't really want us to be happy. Or, why do you need to go to that family dinner? Don't you want to spend time with me? I thought we were building something here.
So it's framed as love. It's framed as us against the world.
Yes. And slowly, it's easier to not see them than to have the argument. The invitations dry up because you keep saying no. And suddenly, 6 months or a year later, you are alone on an island with the perpetrator. And that's when the real work begins.
And once you're on the island, the monitoring kicks in.
Huge tactic.
Yeah.
And technology has made this terrifyingly easy. Tracking apps, reading emails, checking mileage on the car.
Oh, this one really creeped me out in the research. There was a study where a woman shared a specific example of how her partner did this. It wasn't even high tech, it was psychological. He would drop little snippets into conversation like knowing private details about a friend's baby that she hadn't told him.
That is incredibly destabilizing.
Right, and when she asked, wait, how did you know that? He'd accuse her of losing it.
Yeah.
He'd say, you told me that yesterday, don't you remember? God, you're so forgetful lately.
It's surveillance mixed with gaslighting. It makes the victim feel like their own mind is failing them.
And that ties into financial control, which is another huge pillar.
Often the most effective one. Taking control of all the money, giving strict allowances to adult partners, hiding resources. It's not just about greed, it's about logistics.
Yeah.
It's about making sure the victim literally cannot afford the gas money or the bus fare to walk out the door.
It's practical entrapment.
It is. You're describing the construction of a prison where the walls are invisible, but the guards are very, very real.
I want to make this concrete for our listener because lists of tactics can feel abstract. We found a case study in the work of researcher Evan Stark, the story of a woman named Terry. And I think this story explains why this is so dangerous better than any definition could.
Terry's story is heartbreaking, but it's essential to understanding the lethality of this. It shows how the system fails.
So, in the week before her death, Terry's husband didn't beat her. There were no broken bones. Instead, he locked her out of their bedroom. He limited her to 1 meal a day.
Just pause on that for a second. Think about the level of control required to dictate another adult human being's food intake. That is treating someone like a pet or a prisoner.
It gets worse. He removed the toilet paper from the bathroom. He took her money and her car keys. And he forbade her from holding her own baby, except to breastfeed.
It's the systematic stripping away of basic human dignity. He was deconstructing her humanity piece by piece.
Then here's the climax of that horror. Terry actually managed to escape. She got to a neighbor's house and called 911. But when her husband returned, she panicked. She became hysterical and begged the operator to call off the police. She said, if they come, he'll kill me.
And the police were recalled.
Hours later, she was dead.
And this brings us to the critical failure of the system at that time. Until he murdered her, Terry's husband hadn't committed what the legal system considered a serious crime. Locking someone out of a bedroom, not a felony. Taking toilet paper, not a crime. Limiting food, hard to prosecute. But those were the precursors to murder.
That is the gap we're talking about. The law was looking for a punch, but he was killing her agency.
The law essentially said, well, he hasn't touched you yet, so it's a civil matter. But he was tightening the noose the entire time.
And this leads us to the why. Why is this pattern so predictive of homicide? We have research from Dichter and colleagues that shed some light on this.
Right. They found that women experiencing coercive control report higher frequencies of every form of violence.
Yeah.
Physical, sexual, psychological. It's not an either. It's not he's controlling, but at least he's not violent.
It's he's controlling, therefore he is dangerous.
Exactly. If the control is present, the risk of severe violence skyrockets. 1 in 3 women in that study scored in the extreme danger category. But society has a hard time seeing it. We like our villains to be, obvious monsters.
You brought up a historical example in our notes that I think perfectly illustrates this blindness, the O.J. Simpson case. Now, putting aside the verdict itself, the reaction of the jury to the evidence was, well, it explains a lot about where we were as a culture.
It does. It's a fascinating look at how we view domestic abuse.
Yeah.
After Simpson's acquittal, there were interviews with the jurors. One juror called the domestic violence evidence presented by the prosecution a smokescreen.
A smoke screen, like it was
Yeah.
irrelevant.
Yes. They asked, what had all the talk about domestic abuse have to do with homicide? Another juror suggested that if they wanted to talk about domestic violence, they should have gone down the hall to domestic violence court.
Wow. So in their minds, they saw the abuse and the murder as 2 completely separate, unrelated things.
Completely.
Like, sure, he hit her, but that doesn't mean he killed her.
Exactly. They viewed the abuse as a relationship problem, a messy marriage, and the murder as a crime. They couldn't connect the dots that the murder was the ultimate act of control in a long pattern of control. They missed the trajectory entirely.
That is a massive wake-up call. We have to stop seeing incidents and start seeing patterns.
Like Rex.
Now, I want to pivot to the impact on the victim. Because even if, and that's a big if, physical violence never happens, the damage is profound. We have research here from Cassing and Collins about coercive control trauma.
This is really cutting-edge understanding. They break it down into 3 patterns of trauma. First, there are attacks on autonomy. You lose the ability to make even minor decisions because you are paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice.
It's like living in a minefield where the mines move every day.
Yes. Second, there are attacks on identity. The constant humiliation erodes your self-worth until you don't know who you are anymore. You become a shell. And third, there's the environment of terror.
Which creates that hypervigilance.
Precisely. You're constantly scanning for threats. Your body is just flooded with cortisol, 204/7, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
There was another case study mentioned in the New South Wales report, a woman named Sam, and this one, honestly, this felt like the plot of a psychological thriller. Her partner secretly placed an electronic sound device under the house.
I remember reading this. It's purely sadistic.
He would use it to play noises like a crying baby or knocking or someone trying to break in at random times, just to make her think she was losing her mind.
That is psychological torture.
It is. And when she asked him about it, he'd say she was crazy. He told her nobody wants to be friends with a crazy person.
See, that is the entrapment. He manufactures the insanity and then uses that so-called insanity as the reason she can't leave or see friends.
Well, that's vile.
And that is why so many survivors say the psychological injury is harder to recover from than the physical injury. Bones heal, bruises fade. But regaining your sense of reality, regaining your belief that you are a sane, capable person, that takes a long, long time.
And it gets even more complex when we look at who is being targeted. You mentioned intersectionality in your notes. And I think we need to unpack this because sometimes people hear that word and think it's just academic jargon. But here, it's a weapon.
It is a weapon. Perpetrators are opportunistic predators. They tailor their control based on the victim's specific vulnerabilities. They don't use a generic script. So if we look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, for example, perpetrators often weaponize the fear of the state.
Like threatening to call Child Protective Services.
Exactly. Threatening to report them as neglectful mothers to have their children taken away, or preventing them from visiting their country or participating in cultural events. They use the system's history of racism and the stolen generations as a tool of control. They know the victim fears the system more than they fear the partner.
That is insidious. It's using the government as your enforcer.
It is. In the LGBTQIA+ community, we see threats to out the partner to family or employers who might not be accepting, or controlling their gender expression, telling a trans partner what they can or cannot wear to match a certain identity.
And for people with disabilities.
Coercive medical interventions, or restricting reproductive rights, or even just moving furniture so a visually impaired partner can't navigate their own home. The perpetrator uses ableism, racism, or homophobia to lock the cage tighter. They say, no one else will want you, or the police won't believe you because of who you are.
So the abuser makes themselves the only safe place, even though they are the danger.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've established what it is, how bad it is, and how it works.
Right.
The next logical question, and it's the question everyone always asks when they hear these stories, is why didn't they just leave?
I hate that question.
I know, but we have to address it because it's the first thing people think.
It is, but let's flip it. We need to understand that leaving is the most dangerous time in the relationship.
Why is that? Common sense says if you leave, you're safe.
Common sense is wrong here. Coercive control is about control. When a victim tries to leave, the perpetrator feels that control slipping. It's the ultimate act of rebellion. And to regain it, they escalate, often to lethal levels.
So staying might actually be a survival strategy in the moment.
An absolute survival strategy. Victims are expert risk managers. They know the temperature of the house better than anyone. Statistics show it takes survivors an average of 7 attempts to leave permanently.
7 times. That's heartbreaking.
And that's not because they are weak. It's because the system of control is incredibly effective. And frankly, the abuse doesn't end when the relationship ends.
Right, post-separation abuse.
It continues. Stalking, financial sabotage, using the family court system to harass the victim, filing endless motions just to drain their bank account, using the children as pawns. The cage just gets bigger. It doesn't disappear just because you moved out.
It feels overwhelming, honestly. It feels like a machine designed to crush people. But we are seeing some movement, right? There is some light at the end of this tunnel regarding the law.
There is. We are seeing a significant legislative shift. As of July 2024, New South Wales has criminalized coercive control with a penalty of up to 7 years in prison. Queensland followed suit in March 2024 with penalties up to 14 years.
That is a huge change. That's acknowledging that the toilet paper incident and the food incident are crimes when you put them together.
It is. It signals that the law is finally trying to catch up with reality. The goal is to move from an incident-based view, did he hit you on this date, to understanding the pattern of entrapment.
But laws are just paper if the culture doesn't change.
That is the key. Laws are a tool, but society needs to shift. We need to stop asking, why didn't they leave? and start asking, why did the perpetrator choose to abuse?
Yeah.
We need to put the focus back where it belongs, on the person building the cage, not the person trapped inside it.
So what does this all mean for us, the people listening to this deep dive?
It means we need to validate survivors. If someone describes these behaviors, the isolation, the monitoring, the financial control, we need to believe them, even if we don't see a bruise. We need to recognize the pattern.
Coercive control is domestic abuse. That's the headline here. It is a strategic course of conduct that is highly predictive of homicide.
Absolutely.
If you or someone you know is experiencing this, please know there is help. You can call 1-800-OUR-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. And of course, if you are in immediate danger, call 00.
And listen to your gut. If a relationship feels like a cage, it probably is.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. We walk past people every day. We see couples at the grocery store, at dinner parties, neighbors across the fence. We see the curated photos on social media.
The happy families?
Right. But knowing what we know now, how many of those normal-looking relationships are actually masking this dynamic?
And more importantly, now that you know what to look for, will you be able to see it?
Understanding this concept is the only way to intervene before it's too late. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Stay safe out there.